Morning guys, my name's Ian and I'm a psychic medium based in the UK. Today in this video I want to talk a bit about the dangers of mediumship and what is passed on today as mediumship in spiritualism in many churches up and down the country in various countries, and also through various physical mediumship and private seances. I'd firstly like to say that I'm 57 years old and I've been on a spiritual pathway since I was about 13, when I started seeking answers to the meaning of life and why we're here, what happens when we die. And during those 57 years, I've met many wonderful people that have enlightened me and also disappointed me when I found truth. So although I'm going to say some things today you may disagree with, I would just like to say that these are only my own experiences. Each man finds his own truth, and all I'm doing with you today is sharing my truth. It's up to you to decide whether or not it resonates with you or not. If it does, great. If it doesn't, you move on and continue on your pathway. I'm going to read you quite a lengthy discourse of a couple of web pages because I think they actually explain it better than I could. Although some of the language is a bit arcane, I will try to elaborate on it a little bit as I go along. So, mediumship. Mediumship and adeptship are diametrically opposed. Mediumship is the opposite of adeptship. The medium is the passive instrument of foreign influences, and the adept actively controls himself and all inferior potencies. That's a statement on the internet about the difference between a medium and a adept or mystic. The adepts of Eastern magic are uniformly in perfect mental and bodily health. And in fact, the voluntary and independent production of phenomena is impossible to any others. We have known many, and never a sick man among them. The adept retains perfect consciousness, shows no change of bodily temperature or other sign of morbidity, requires no conditions, but will do his feats anywhere and everywhere, and instead of being passive and in subjugation to a foreign influence, rules the forces with an iron will. But we have elsewhere shown that the medium and the adept are as opposed as the poles. We will only add here that the body, soul and spirit of the adept are all conscious and working in harmony, and the body of the medium is an inert clod, and even his soul may be away in a dream while its habitation is occupied by another. Mediums and channels were never permitted to receive initiation or be admitted into the greater mysteries. Again, I'm going to read how dangerous may often become untrained mediumship, and how thoroughly it was understood and provided against by the ancient sages is perfectly exemplified in the case of Socrates. The old Grecian philosopher was a medium, hence he had never been initiated into the mysteries, for such was the rigorous law, but he had his familiar spirit, as they called it, his daemon, and this invisible counsellor became the cause of his death. It is generally believed that if he was not initiated into the mysteries, it was because he himself neglected to become so. But the secret records teach us that it was because he could not be admitted to participate in the sacred rites, and precisely as we state, on account of his mediumship. There was a law against the admission not only of such as were convicted of deliberate witchcraft, but even of those who were known to have a familiar spirit. The law was just and logical because a genuine medium is moralist irresponsible, and the eccentricities of Socrates are thus accounted for in some degree. A medium must be passive, and if a firm believer in his spirit guide, he will allow himself or herself to be ruled by the latter, not by the rules of the sanctuary. A medium of olden times, like the modern medium, was subject to be entranced at the will and pleasure of the power which controlled him. Therefore, he could not well have been entrusted with the awful secrets of the final initiation, never to be revealed under the penalty of death. The old sage, in unguarded moments of spiritual inspiration, revealed that which he had never learned, and was therefore put to death as an atheist. How then, with such an instant as that of Socrates, in relation to the visions and spiritual wonders of the inner temple, can anyone assert that these seers, theurgists, were all spirit mediums, Neither Pythagoras, Plato, nor any of the later more important Neoplatonists, Lambilascus, Longinus, Proclus, nor Apollonius of Tyana were mediums, for in such case they would not have been admitted to the mysteries at all. Mediumship is measured by the quality of the aura with which the individual is surrounded. This may be dense, cloudy, nauseating to the pure spirit, and attract only those foul beings who delight in it, as the eel does in turbid waters, or it may be pure, crystalline, limpid, opalescent as the morning dew. All depends upon the moral character of the medium. About such men as Apollonius, Lambilascus, Polonius, and Porphyry, excuse my spelling, they gathered their heavy nimbus. It was involved by the power of their own souls in close union with their spirits, by the superhuman morality and sanctity of their lives, and aided by frequent interior ecstatic contemplation. Such holy men pure spiritual influences could approach, radiating around an atmosphere of benign beneficence that caused evil spirits to flee before them. Not only is it not possible for such to exist in their aura, but they cannot even remain in that of obsessed persons. If they exercise their will or even approach them, this is mediatorship, not mediumship. Such persons are temples in which dwell the spirits of the living God, but if the temple is defiled by the admission of an evil passion, thought or desire, the mediator falls into the sphere of sorcery. Happy are they impure of heart, who repel unconsciously by that very cleanness of their inner nature the dark spirits of evil, for verily they have no other weapons or defence but that inborn goodness and purity. Mediumism is practised in our days. It is more undesirable than the gift and the robe of Nessus. Now, I know that sounds very complicated, and a lot of people listening to this will say, what the hell is that fucking guy talking about? And it is complicated, and it's very hard to understand. And the problem is, most spiritualists come from one viewpoint. They come from a Christian spiritualist teaching and don't study anything else but spiritualism. Whereas a mystic studies many different pathways. And I think the mystic has a greater understanding of the spiritual realms than the spiritualist does. And if spiritualists were a little more open-minded, I think they would understand more what they were dealing with. But unfortunately, they don't. And I'm bound to get attacked for this video by all sorts of people saying it's wrong, etc., etc., etc. But I can only say to you, 57 years, everything that I've just said in this short reading, I have found to be true. Okay, I'm just going to go back over some of it and just comment on some of the phrases. Basically, the mediumship is the opposite of adeptship. The medium is the passive instrument of foreign influences. What they basically mean is, mediums today basically let themselves be taken over by a what they believe to be a spiritual entity. And I do use the term there, what they believe to be a spiritual entity, which I'll get onto a bit later, because most of the time they are not communicating with the deceased. Again, after 50 odd years, I've been to hundreds of seances, I've visited many mediums, I've sat in circles, and even with my own experiences, I do not believe that most of today's mediums communicate with the dead. Okay, but I will continue that. It's going to sound contradictory because I'm calling myself a medium, but I'm also a mystic. And I will elaborate more as this series of tapes go on to give you a greater understanding of life and death and what happens to the soul when we pass over and what is possible. Basically, the adept, through years of training, usually in spirituality, they develop what I call a spirit spark atom within their heart. This is something very hard to describe, but they know, okay, they have a knowing about life and creation that you can't explain to somebody else. They just know certain things, okay? And I would just say that that's what adepts are. I'm not saying I'm an adept by any means. I wouldn't even consider myself an adept. I mean, that would be an awful thing to say, so that puts my ego very high, and I'm quite a humble person. I tend to ask questions a lot. So I'm a naturally analytical and a Virgo, and I want to see truth and I want to find truth. And a lot of what I've seen so far isn't. Anyway, I'm going to jump forward a bit now and read something else to you. It's quite a long treatise, okay? It's called The Dangers and Deceptions of Channeling, which refers to mediumship as well, okay? Okay, I'll read it. In the middle of the 19th century, a new spiritual craze swept through the Western world. It was called Spiritualism, and it encouraged the practice of mediumship. Medium was the term used by the spiritualists to describe someone who was able to enter into a very passive, now note the key word there, passive and receptive condition or state, in order to become the mouthpiece or vehicle of a manifestation for unseen entities. Now the key there is a passive state. The medium enters a passive state. The adept and mystic doesn't. The adept and mystic is fully conscious at all times as to what is going on. Spiritualists believed that these entities, which spoke and transmitted other types of messages through mediums, were departed souls or spirits, often using the terms soul and spirit in a very loose and undefined way, as many people still do. And again, the key there is the word they believed, okay, they believed. Mediumistic and spiritualistic seances began to be held in just about every city and town across the USA, the United Kingdom and much of Europe. Often the entities speaking through the medium would purport to be the souls of spirits of departed loved ones of those in attendance at the seance or gathering, whilst on other occasions entities speaking through mediums could make all sorts of important claims about their entity. Even Jesus Christ, or rather unseen entities calling themselves Jesus Christ, transmitted messages usually of a highly sentimental, unphilosophical, immature and even foolish nature. Great figures from spiritual history and world history put in appearances, from Krishna to St. Peter to Buddha to Napoleon to George Washington. The fact that these beings, giving forth speeches and messages through their mediums, seemed entirely ignorant of even basic facts and information which they would have known during their lifetime, and that their views and messages about certain vital matters were now largely contradictory to those which history and record shows them to have held whilst they were on earth, in many cases now taking on a distinctly westernised or Christianised nature, just like the nature and views of the mediums themselves, seemed not to daunt or faze the spiritualists, who were so overwhelmed with all the sensational claims and messages that they willingly abandoned their faculties of rationality, reason, common sense and discernment. How many times have you seen that today? This little phrase here, willingly abandoned their faculties of rationality, reason, common sense and discernment. You only have to read some of the stuff, put up some of the blogs of some of the physical seances of people vomiting up gemstones in a seance, or having gemstones come out their eyes, or being squirted with water. I had a lady contact me 2 days ago who attended a seance in Kent with a well-known UK medium. The seance was held in total darkness, so you couldn't see what was going on at all. She was splashed with water, drums were banged, there was lots of singing, which she said she felt masked out noise of something else going on. Why on earth would a spirit splash you with water? Why would they squirt a water pistol? Why would they bang a drum? It defies rationality. That's not spiritual, okay? It's really not spiritual. And I'm afraid people that go to these sort of seances are being conned. I'm not saying the medium is necessarily conning them willingly, but I am saying they are being conned into believing it's the spirit of the dead communicating, because it's not. Anyway, that's controversial and I will carry on. The equally alarming fact that a Jesus speaking through a medium at one end of the street was expressing entirely different views and sentiments to the Jesus speaking through a medium at the other end of the street was also often conveniently overlooked by the spiritualists. It was a tragic fact that a discerning number of mediums often ended up going insane, becoming alcoholics, descending into a life of crime and drugs and exploitation, or even committing suicide. Enter a Russian noblewoman, Madame Helena Blavatsky, sent to the United States by her Eastern spiritual teachers in Tibet to found the Theosophical movement, which she did in 1875. In the teachings of Theosophy, the actual nature of such messages and entities is explained in the thorough and complex detail which such a matter requires. H.B. Blavatsky's teachers, known as the Masters or Masters of the Wisdom, were opposed to spiritualism and mediumship, and foreseeing a dire and calamitous fate for the West, it was allowed to continue unabated, instructed her to reveal the truth behind the phenomena. Now, I should just point out here that Helena Blavatsky is not the only famous mystic that's basically told the truth about spiritualism and it's been ignored. Rudolf Steiner wrote a lot of treatises about clairvoyance, particularly negative clairvoyance. Emanuel Swedenborg, the famous seer, also had lots of experience of dealing with spiritual realms and wrote about the dangers of mediumship. Jacob Boehme, or Jacob Boehm, as he's sometimes known, wrote some fantastic stuff about the spiritual realms. Again, but none of this stuff is really studied by spiritualists, which I find quite strange. They have this one fixed viewpoint, and they don't look at great philosophy that's been passed down for hundreds, if not thousands of years, about the nature of reality and the nature of the spiritual soul of man. I shall continue. First, apart from a very small number of exceptions, it is impossible for a departed soul to communicate with those on earth through a medium, or even to see or have any knowledge whatsoever of what is going on here. Wow, that's a very, very important statement, and I'm going to read it again. First, apart from a very small number of exceptions, it is impossible for a departed soul to communicate with those on earth through a medium, or even to see or have any knowledge whatsoever of what is going on here. Even without going into complex metaphysical explanations, the truth of this assertion can be easily be seen if we consider the following. The place, or rather the state of what we call heaven, is one of supreme and perfect bliss and paradise. As such, logic tells us that no sorrow or even the slightest shade of pain can be experienced therein. But if departed souls are able to look down or return to spirit and see all that's going on earth, and especially in their homes, what kind of bliss or paradise can that be? Thus, according to the doctrine of the spiritualists, we unfortunate human beings are not liberated from the sorrows of this life, even by death. Imagine a departed mother looking down upon, or invisibly visiting, or automatically being attuned with her former home, in the days, weeks, months and years after her passing, and observing and feeling completely, helplessly, the sorrows, the sadness, the suffering, the mistakes, etc. of her dear loved ones, for whom she is now severed by death, unable to help, comfort or contact. Can this be bliss? That would be even more hellish than life on earth. Thankfully, nature is kind enough to create an impassable chasm, called the ring past not, between the heaven state and the earth state, so that those who have passed on are entirely out of the reach of physical existence and of individuals on the physical plane. Secondly, the small number of exceptions hinted at above consists mainly of those that have committed suicide and those whose death has been in some way the result of an accident, violence or murder. The suicide victim, the individual who has murdered himself or herself, remains within the atmosphere and attraction of our earth for the entire remaining duration of the life they had been destined to live. For example, someone who commits suicide at the age of 20 but has been destined by their karma to live to the age of 90 must spend those 70 remaining years in what some have called the astral plane before they are able to undergo the complete death process and enter into the heavenly state. The person who commits suicide finds himself just as alive afterwards, only now in even more of a trapped state than before, often filled with regrets and longing to get back in touch with earth life. It is relatively easy for them to either initiate contact with a medium or for a medium to seek them out. But this is the worst thing the suicide victim can do, as it is spiritually unlawful for it to reiterate itself with the life of which it was supposedly deprived itself. The Masters and HPB taught that the suicide victim who does this will often lose their soul forever as a result. When their natural life term finally reaches its end, a dark fate will also naturally be in store for the medium who enabled such a thing to happen, as they would have created terrible karma for themselves. And that's very important. We did again. A dark fate will also naturally be in store for the medium who enabled such a thing, as they will have created terrible karma for themselves. Okay. Just going to carry on here a little bit. A variety of different states are initially in store for the soul whose life has come to a premature end through accident, violence or murder. The nature of the state will depend on the inner nature of the individual. In one of the letters written by the master Kuthomi to early theosophists, it is explained in this regard that the truly good and pure enter into a state of rosy dreams for the rest of the duration of their natural life term and then enter into the heaven state. The average person, neither good nor bad, may or may not be easily attracted by mediums, but either way must remain in the karma luka, which is the atmosphere and attraction of our earth plane, the unseen psychic plane that surrounds the physical plane, until the expiration of the natural term. The bad, sinful, and sensual victims of accident, violence or murder end up wandering about desperately in the karma loka until the natural death hour comes about, and these individuals are easily enticed by the opportunities offered by mediums. In many cases they become truly demonic in their behaviour and in their abuse of the medium and of others through the medium. A terrible fate is eventually in store for such entities when their natural life term reaches its close. Third, everyone who dies leaves behind what can be called an astral shell, which is the remnant of the least spiritual, the most mundane and the most essential portions of themselves from the lifetime just ended. These particular aspects and characteristics naturally being unsuited and unable to enter into the spiritually heavenly state, this is not the actual individual soul, but is simply a senseless, subjective form which eventually disintegrates, usually within a few decades at the most. This shell contains a large portion of memories and knowledge which the individual possessed during their lifetime, but these are merely discarded and gradually fading remnants, without any actual individual consciousness behind them, as the actual soul will now have entered into Devakan and be beyond the reach of anyone on the physical plane. Okay. These astral shells roam senselessly around in the karma loka and are easily contacted by those with mediumistic tendencies or psychic sensitivity. And we all have mediumistic tendencies and we all have psychic sensitivity. There's a lot of bullshit written about, not everyone can be a medium. It's complete rubbish. Everybody is a medium and everybody is psychic. It's just developed to different degrees in different people, but everybody can do it. Okay, so these astral shells or karma rupas roam senselessly around in the karma loka and are easily contacted by those with mediumistic tendencies or psychic sensitivity. Since they are able to senselessly repeat and recite certain pieces of information and knowledge which the individual possessed during its life on earth, they are easily mistaken by many to be the real departed soul, and therein lies the trap. I'll read that bit again. Since they are able to senselessly repeat and recite certain pieces of information and knowledge which the individual possessed during its life on earth, they are easily mistaken by many to actually be the real departed soul. It is these astral shells which comprise the majority of the entities contacted by mediums and in spiritualistic gatherings. Okay. Fourth, the Masters taught that all genuinely high and spiritually pure beings, including the Masters themselves, are forbidden by wise and intransgressible laws to ever allow themselves to be channeled through mediums. It was also pointed out that like only ever attracts like, and that the law of attraction and repulsion is always in operation. This means that a medium can never attract or become a conduit of entities which are of a significantly higher or more spiritual nature than himself, but only those of a similar or lower nature. And in most cases, in the seances that I've been to, and I've been to many seances over the years, the medium attracts lower astral entities that pass themselves off as the deceased using the energy of the medium and the energy generated by the sitters in the seance. They're not communicating with the deceased, just an entity masquerading as a deceased. Okay, let's carry on here a little bit. Let's read a little bit more here. I think that will probably cover it for now. If I go into anything else, it'll probably get a little more complicated. So basically, this is just some teachings here from Helena Blavatsky, who was a great mystic and philosopher. But what I'm saying here is to you that, you know, she wasn't the only one that said this. Do your own research on the internet. Read some of the writings of the ancient philosophers, the mystics, like I said, Jack and Burma, Rudolf Steiner, even Allan Kardec, a modern day spiritualist. And you'll see that what passes off as spiritualism, I believe, is one of the biggest lies perpetuated on mankind and keeps us in a state of permanent ignorance, because by getting involved in it and immersing ourselves in it, we're actually not finding the truth, and the truth is being blocked by various means and forms. That's all I'm going to say on this at the moment. I hope you found it interesting. It's a hell of a lot to take in on what I've just read. You can read all this yourself by going to blavatskyphilosophy.com, but I say Helena Blavatsky isn't the only one that says this. Do your own research. Rudolf Steiner warns about the dangers of spiritualism and negative clairvoyance, and about astral shells. But again, you need to read it yourself. I just touched on one more thing while I'm on today, and that's trance mediumship. At the moment, trance mediumship is very in the vogue. You see adverts in the psychic press for trance channeling weekends, learn to be a trance medium, how to go into trance, blah 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 blah. Now I'm going to say a few things about trance, and I do say this with some authority before people start slating me off on Facebook. I'm a highly experienced hypnotherapist. I've studied psychology, and for a number of years I had a private hypnotherapy clinic at 10 Harley Street, London. I was consulted as a media expert by the BBC, by several magazines, and by several film production companies. And I do understand trance and what trance is and what trance isn't. And I'll be honest with you, I'm just gobsmacked by what I see sometimes. Some of the things that are perpetuating to be trance, where people sit there like this and they go, hello, my name's Larry, I'm just coming through and I'm your guide. Honest to God. Oh my God, hold my head in my hands. That is not trance. When you go into trance, you do not lose consciousness totally. You know, it's a complete... Oh, God, it makes me so angry. I see this stuff where people sit there rolling backwards and forwards, they're rolling their heads around. And they go, I am in trance now. Yes, I can hear you. I am from another enterprise. You know, God's sake, or you get a child's voice come through, or not. The two things you see most often are a child's voice or an old man's voice. Simply because an old man's voice is one of the easiest to do. When you talk like an old man, when I was alive on earth, I lived in a little village. I died at 86 years old from a heart attack. I just want to say that your life is full of love and good things are going to happen to you. Yes. You know, and people believe it. Honest to God. How can you believe that? It's rubbish. Absolute rubbish. And again, you get some people talk in a little child's voice. Hello, my name's Ian. I'm going to talk like a little child. No, I can't really do it. I've got a bit of a sore throat, but you get the meaning anyway. Anyway, trance mediumship. I think what I'll do, I'll do a separate video on trance and on how to go into trance safely. Because to go into trance is quite easy to do, and it's not as complicated as people make out. And some of the things you read, I'll just say, don't believe them. Watch the second video coming up, trance mediumship and how to go into it. Again, I hope you found this video interesting. If you'd like to find out more about me, you can go to my website, www.ianbroadmore.com or www.giantleapcoaching.com, which will tell you a bit more about myself and my background. Again, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying this is my views based upon my experience, and this is stuff I personally experience. And I would just say the spiritualist movement, I believe, as it stands at the moment, And what is coming through in seances and through private home circles is not the departed. You are not talking to the dead, okay? You are sometimes making connections with energies, and you are sometimes making connection with very negative energies. Sometimes it is purely an expression from the medium's own subconscious manifesting. But again, I won't go into that all now because it takes too long. But do your own research, make up your own mind, and I hope you've enjoyed this video and have a great day.